It's been a while. Still childless. You're a defective woman who can't show me my grandchild.
I've had my share of troubles with Susan, my mother-in-law, in the past, but even now, thinking about it makes my blood boil. Her harassment over my inability to have children was just too much. I don't know how much she wanted grandchildren, but it really hurt that she blamed me entirely for not having them. To call someone defective, what a horrible thing to say. I couldn't help but be somewhat impressed by it. Right now, I'm at the park, and I'm not alone. My child is right there, you know? The look on Susan's face when she heard that. She had been so eager, practically dying for a grandchild, and there it was. But reality can be cruel. She doesn't realize that what goes around comes around. How naive. I guess it's time she figured it out. I won't let her forget this now. My name is Anna, and I'm a 45-year-old homemaker. I've always loved children, which led me to earn a teaching credential at university and work as a teacher at a public elementary school. The teaching job was challenging at times, but there was joy in being involved in the children's growth, and I felt it was my true calling. I was immersed in my work, but one day a childhood friend introduced me to someone. That was how I met my husband, Michael. At the time, Michael was 25 years old, had recently graduated from college, and was a history teacher at a middle school. Apparently, he was concerned about the lack of opportunities to meet people while working at a middle school. Additionally, he had been devoted solely to his studies during college, so he hadn't dated women much. He had mentioned that his interest in dating women was the reason he consulted a friend. Even though the ages of the children we teach at elementary and middle school are different, I and he are both teachers, so she introduced him to me. When my friend introduced him, I wasn't seeing anyone and was all about work. So I wasn't too keen on it, but I thought I'd meet him at least once. I remember that day clearly. We were supposed to meet at a cafe, but he was late. I'll wait another 30 minutes, and if he doesn't show up, I'm leaving. Just then, someone ran into the cafe.
I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting.
Michael, gasping for breath, looked as if he could barely stand. No, it's okay. I was just worried something had happened.
Actually, I got caught up recommending books to a student in my class, and before I knew it, it was time to meet.
Hearing his response, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. At the same time, I could tell he was a good person. If he could get that involved in discussing books with a student, he must be well loved. And I couldn't blame him for imagining Michael eagerly introducing recommended books to his students. I'm sorry, it's our first meeting, and I'm laughing so much. I want to know more about you.
Oh, really? Seeing you smile made my nerves disappear.
You were nervous.
Yes, well, I didn't expect to meet such a wonderful woman.
Michael said, somewhat shyly. Come on, I'm almost 35, you know? I'm probably quite a bit older than you.
I'm 25 now, but age doesn't matter to me.
Michael and I started to have more conversations, trying to understand each other better. It was clear he was well liked by his students for his passion for work, his compassion towards others, and his popularity. It seemed that Michael also thought highly of me.
We haven't known each other long, but I'd regret it if I didn't say this now. Would you consider a serious relationship with marriage in mind with me?
Michael asked, his face turning red as he looked at me. My mind was made up. I think I could have a good relationship with you, Michael. Thank you. Time spent with Michael was always enjoyable. Beyond our dates, I found myself wanting to be with him more and more, and then he proposed to me.
Since the first time I met you, Anna, I've hoped we could be together forever. Will you marry me?
Yes, I feel like I can be happy with you, Michael. I answered without hesitation. We met each other's parents and made it official. We were going to get married. Marrying the person I love and living together was something I couldn't have imagined just a short time ago. We discussed our future work and children as we planned our marriage. Michael respected my thoughts and my life. That was one of the reasons I fell for him. Even after we're married, I want to continue working. I really love my job as a teacher.
I can see that, Anna. But what about children? I'd like to have them if possible, but I want to respect your thoughts on actually having them.
Of course, I want children too. It might be tough balancing them with work, but I hope we can have them sooner rather than later. Michael and I decided to try for a child while I continued working within what was possible. This is something bestowed upon us. We can't control it on our own. However, I didn't realize that troubling times were starting to brew in our life.
I'm heading out to sports practice.
Okay, darling. You'll be back by dinner, right? Take care. After seeing Michael off, I was drinking coffee alone in the living room when the doorbell rang.
Hello, Anna.
Hi, Susan. Michael's at school for sports practice. Is there something you need? Susan seemed momentarily disappointed, but then turned back to me and suddenly said,
It's almost been a year since you got married, hasn't it?
Yes, thanks to you.
That's not what I mean. Before you look after other people's kids, you should have your own. If you can't even manage that, you might as well quit your job.
Susan looked frustrated, as if she couldn't convey her message clearly. It's kind of sudden to say that.
Isn't it about time? Or were you not planning on telling me until you're stable?
What? Children?
You're 35, aren't you? It's normal to have 2 or 3 kids by now.
I was taken aback by her sudden interest in having children. But this isn't something I can just decide on my own, so I decided to be honest. Michael and I have been talking about it. If it happens, you'll be the first to know.
What are you being so casual about? I can't understand how you can afford to wait.
Her increasingly anxious demeanor puzzled me, especially since she had seemed so calm when we met before we were married. I'm sorry if I upset you, but this is not something I can control on my own.
So what are you saying? Is it Michael's fault?
Then Susan walked briskly into the room, and from inside, I could hear Susan's voice.
What is this machine? I just tripped over it.
I'm sorry, that's an air purifier.
An air purifier? It's so big.
I'm particularly sensitive to the air quality because of my dust allergy. I'm really sensitive to house dust, and I start sneezing uncontrollably. That's why I have this air purifier, even though it's in the way. I'm sorry. Then Susan sighed heavily.
Are you just making excuses?
Excuses?
Because that's it. You say it's dust or allergies, and that makes you weak, doesn't it? If you really need fresh air, just open a window.
Unfortunately, I live on the second floor of an apartment building in a busy area. I'm also worried about exhaust gas. Well, there is exhaust gas, so I can't really open the windows much.
Relying on such a nonsensical device. That's why you can't have kids, isn't it?
Susan seemed convinced she was right as she looked at me with a self-assured expression.
You want children, right? Then come to my house next week.
But, well,
It's fine. My husband isn't home, and I'm the only one there, so it won't bother anyone.
I guess I have no choice but to go. Just thinking about it made me feel depressed. The following week, I visited my in-laws' house.
Come this way.
Susan pulled me by her hand and led me into the living room. As soon as I entered, a strange smell hit my nose. Excuse me, but I hesitated, not knowing how to describe the strange smell, when suddenly a cup of tea was handed to me.
Here, this tea is supposed to help with fertility.
Am I supposed to drink this? And yours, Susan?
I'm not drinking it. They say good medicine tastes bitter, so I'm forcing myself to give it to you.
The tea had a strange color and smell, and I couldn't imagine drinking it. While I was troubled, Susan unzipped my bag and stuffed a paper bag inside. What's this? Please don't touch my bag without asking.
Don't talk to me like I'm a thief. They say drinking 4 cups of this tea a day works wonders. Here's the next thing.
I was dragged out to the yard by her. There, I saw a mountain of laundry piled up. What's with all this laundry? It was towels, small clothes, bibs. These things were clearly not hers.
My friend gave them to me. Touching and washing baby clothes is said to increase fertility. It's also good practice for when you have a child.
Then, from nowhere, she brought a large wash tub and a washboard.
They say if you wash with all your heart, a child will be happy to dwell in your womb.
I watched her walk back to the living room alone, feeling incredulous. I do want children, and Michael and I have talked about it. Despite us having our own lives and rhythms, and agreeing to wait without rushing, I can't understand why Susan is in such a hurry. It made me incredibly angry, but I couldn't just do nothing and go home. As instructed, I washed the piled-up children's clothes on the washboard and hung them to dry. Susan, I'm done.
Then come back the day after tomorrow. Wash them here like today.
No, I have work the day after tomorrow.
Work. You can make time before or after work if you really want children. If you really want them, you'd make an effort, right?
I'm competitive, so I ended up doing as she said. After school, I went to in-laws' house late at night and washed unknown children's clothes by hand in the dark. Because I was washing a lot of clothes by hand in the cold, my hands became rough. I use hand cream to prevent it, but my hands quickly became dry and chapped.
Hey Anna, what happened to your hands?
Michael looked at me with concern, but I hesitated to tell him the truth. To me, it felt like an outdated superstition, but for Michael, it was something his own mother was doing. Plus, I knew Michael wanted children, and I worried about speaking ill of his mom. Actually, Susan keeps asking when we'll have kids. She told me that washing children's clothes by hand could help with fertility, so I've been going to her house every other day to wash them. Michael looked at me in disbelief.
Really? You seriously think that will help you have kids?
After thinking for a moment, Michael seemed to make up his mind about something.
Let me talk to my mom. You don't have to go there anymore. Actually, Mom has some inheritance from my dad, and she said she wanted to try living on her own without depending on her son or grandchildren. I'm also going to see a doctor.
A doctor? Why?
Because having kids isn't just a woman's issue, right? Maybe there's something wrong with me, and it's better to know.
I admired this side of Michael. He took my concerns as seriously as his own. Thank you, but don't push yourself too hard.
It's for you, Anna. I can't just sit by and do nothing.
However, it was clear that Susan wouldn't quiet down so easily.
I talked to Mom. You don't have to go over there anymore.
Thank you. I'm sorry for putting you through this, Michael.
No, don't worry about it. Turns out the difficulty in having kids might be because of me.
Michael spoke apologetically.
But the doctor said it's manageable with medication and regular visits. We'll see how it goes and then decide what to do next.
It seemed like the issue was resolved for the moment, but it wasn't over yet. A little while later, a package arrived at our house. It was a cash-on-delivery package from Susan. Inside, there were several books and a long letter. The letter expressed Susan's anger about the conversation Michael had with her. And the books were about pregnancy and child rearing, obviously well used. Honestly, I felt a complex mix of anger and astonishment towards her for going this far. When I talked to Michael about it, it seems he felt the same way.
I told her to stop, and she's still doing this.
What should we do with these books? Honestly, even if we're told to read them.
My mom just wants a grandchild so badly, she can't see anything else. I'm really sorry for making you feel this way.
After thinking, Michael carefully chose his words. It must be tough for him, being caught between his mom and his wife.
She is my mom, but I want to protect my wife, Anna, the most. If it comes to hurting you, I'll need to rethink my relationship with her.
But she's still your mom, right? I don't want you to have regrets if something happens.
Weddings and funerals are unavoidable, but beyond that, we don't need to interact. I'm really sorry for not realizing this sooner.
Michael apologized to me. We decided that outside of necessary social obligations, I would avoid any contact with Susan, blocking her calls and refusing her packages. Michael was still sending her a little money on his own, but since that was a matter between him and his mom, I chose to stay out of it. For a while, we lived peacefully without seeing Susan. Maybe keeping her away was the best thing Michael did for my stress. About 10 years after these problems with Susan started, I was sitting on a park bench, leisurely drinking my coffee. As I savored my coffee, which I hadn't enjoyed in a while, a voice came from behind me.
It's been a while. Still childless. You're a defective woman who can't show me my grandchild.
For a moment, I didn't recognize who it was. But it was my mother-in-law, Susan, much thinner and smaller than before. She's still the same person who looks down on others over the years. Her spiteful gaze made the warm coffee I was enjoying suddenly taste cold and bitter. It was a stark reminder of how emotions can dramatically alter our sense of taste. Well, Susan.
Not showing your face around. What's that about? Surely you haven't been saying unnecessary things to Michael.
I didn't mean it like that, Susan said while poking the ground near my feet with her cane.
What's your intention avoiding your husband's mother to this extent?
She scrutinized me from head to toe with a tone full of sarcasm.
Sitting here alone in the park, sipping coffee so elegantly, you must feel very pleased with yourself.
Susan hasn't changed since the day she commanded me to wash a stranger's baby clothes. I had managed to live peacefully without seeing her for 10 years. I would prefer not to meet her if possible, but I gathered my courage to speak. My children are right over there. Susan looked puzzled for a moment, but then she burst into laughter. She was laughing so hard that her teeth were showing. Is it so funny to her that I have children? She must have decided long ago that it was impossible for me to have children. That's why I think she can take such an attitude without any qualms. It's her prerogative to believe that only those with children can be happy, but I wish she wouldn't impose her values on others. Then she suddenly turned serious and glared at me. I braced myself for what she might say next.
And here I was wondering what you would come up with. Aren't you considerably older than Michael? As if you could have children.
It's true that I'm older than Michael, but it's offensive to assume that precludes me from having children. After all, many couples with an age difference manage to have children without issue. I took a deep breath, ready to speak my mind. That's why. Suddenly, Susan put her index finger to my lips. She raised her finger, signaling me to stop talking, and glared at me.
You should have just done as I said. I don't know what you told him, but you made Michael run away from me. No child would come to such a cursed person.
I felt the weight of her oppression. Having been estranged for 10 years, honestly, I felt physically threatened. The thought of being swallowed up by this situation made me anxious. As Susan was berating me, my children ran over from a short distance, looking concerned. I felt terrible for making them see me like this.
Mom, what's wrong? Is this person someone you know?
Well, this person is. I hesitated to tell Mary and Emma the truth. Although Susan brings back bitter memories for me, she is their grandmother. Is it right to keep them apart based on my personal feelings and reluctance to meet her? But how should I introduce her? I was conflicted. Mary and Emma had never met Susan before, and I hadn't even mentioned her, so they wouldn't suspect she was their grandmother. Then Mary and Emma began to whisper among themselves. They were trying to whisper, but I could hear their voices.
Emma, could this person be? Right? Mary, do you think so too? Because she was also around the other time, it must be her.
Susan pretended not to notice their whispering but approached Mary and Emma. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch them, and the two of them watched with indescribable expressions. Indeed, to Mary and Emma, she was a stranger. Having a trembling hand suddenly thrust toward them would understandably be terrifying.
Could you really be Michael's children, my grandchildren?
Susan approached Mary and Emma as if it were a touching reunion. Then Mary and Emma stepped back a few paces and said to her,
Aren't you the nagging old lady from the store?
What do you mean?
You thought so too? I thought the same.
The two suddenly got excited, and I couldn't understand what was happening.
She's always at the store near our school. Exactly. We always see her yelling at the clerks.
What are you talking about?
She's the person from the store near our school. She's famous for loudly demanding her money back from the clerks. right? She only yells at the young people and says nothing when the person wearing a manager's badge is there.
I had never heard this before, but it was clear she was selectively targeting people to harass. It was as if she only attacked the vulnerable.
I'm just teaching them that they should listen to their elders. I'm doing the right thing.
That's so. Mary and Emma looked at me. Thinking I was being unfairly accused by the nagging old lady from the store, they suddenly sprang into action.
Mom hasn't done anything wrong. Please stop.
Susan, pretending not to hear, moved closer to the two. For Susan, meeting Mary and Emma must have been a momentous occasion. Tears even appeared in her eyes.
Really, my grandchildren? Well, since we're here, let me get a good look at your faces.
Don't come any closer. If something happens to Mom, I'll sound this.
Then, Emma brandished a personal alarm. Seeing the bright-colored, large personal alarm, Susan seemed to shrink back. Anyone would flinch if threatened with a personal alarm. A grandmother being treated like a suspicious person by her grandchildren is certainly not common. I instinctively tried to ensure the safety of the two. Then Susan started shaking uncontrollably.
That's so.
Being treated like a stranger by her long-awaited grandchildren must have been a huge shock. Susan, shivering, looked quite small. However, I was more concerned about something else. I decided to confront Susan further. According to Mary and Emma, you've been demanding refunds at the convenience store. Why is that?
Well, because they keep pushing useless stuff on me that I end up having to return.
She suddenly showed a defiant attitude. Her tone suggested she believed she hadn't done a single thing wrong. I decided to ask her the question she would hate to hear the most. Susan, are you having financial difficulties? Is that why you can engage in such embarrassing behavior in public?
Embarrassing. How dare you say such disrespectful things to an elder?
Believing she deserved respect, it was clear she was uncomfortable having her motives questioned, and Susan seemed a bit flustered. But to be aggressive only towards young clerks, that's usually too embarrassing for most people to do. It's impressive that you don't feel that way, Susan.
Shut up. Enough already.
Susan clenched her teeth in frustration. Then Mary, with a puzzled look, said,
This woman always shouts for a refund after she's finished eating, waving around her empty containers.
That would make sense. It was absurd, brandishing empty containers and yelling. What do you even do with empty containers?
I don't know, but she keeps saying, doing this to a poor old woman who has no money.
The children's words made me realize something. Are you having financial difficulties?
Yes, it's terrible to think about being old and in need of money.
As far as I remember, Susan's house used to be filled with branded goods. She probably spent all of her husband's inheritance. It must be tough to live struggling with money.
If you understand, could you send me a little money? $1,500 or even $1,000 would do.
I dodged Susan's gaze as she leaned in and said, I refuse.
What?
After all you've done, now you ask for help when you're in trouble. That's too much. Susan glared at me, visibly upset.
You're really heartless to not offer a helping hand to such a frail old woman.
As usual, she looked at me as if it were only natural that I should extend a helping hand to her. But there's no need for that. It's all your own doing.
It's sad that these kids have to be raised by a parent like you.
Mary and Emma then stepped in front of me and addressed Susan.
It's not sad at all. We love our mom and don't say terrible things. If you say anything more awful, we'll really go to the police.
Shocked by Mary and Emma's sudden retaliation, Susan was at a loss for words. It must be devastating for her, having longed for grandchildren, to be rebuked by them. I couldn't bear it if I were in her place. Should I give you something you really need right now, Susan?
Really?
Of course. Just wait here. I ran to a nearby store and bought something.
What is this? You think I'm old enough to use this?
I placed a package of adult diapers in front of Susan. The package, prominently labeled sleek hair diapers, was enough to intimidate Susan. She turned bright red with anger. You made me wash children's clothes until my hands got rough, saying it was practice for when you have kids. Don't you remember? Susan's face turned awkward. After mumbling for a while, she murmured in a low voice,
I did it thinking of you. I wanted grandchildren quickly. All my friends have them, and I was the only one left out, so it's the same for me.
For Susan's sake, and because everyone else has grandchildren, you want them too? Are you a child? Susan glared at me resentfully.
Treating people like they are old or like children, you'll see, it will come back to bite you.
It's convenient how you think it's okay for you, but not for others. Then Michael's voice came from behind. He had coincidentally seen us and came over.
I can hardly believe it, but you're not still harassing Anna, are you?
Harassment sounds so harsh. It's just that, well.
I explained the situation to Michael. It seems like Susan is out of money. She's been causing trouble at the local convenience store. Last time I was at her house, it was filled with designer bags and wallets. Michael's normally calm expression suddenly hardened.
Mom, weren't you supposed to be managing with Dad's inheritance without bothering anyone? And didn't you promise to stay away from Anna?
No, I just happened to run into Anna.
Come on, how could it be a coincidence? In this huge park, especially a children's park, and you just happened to bump into Anna. Who would believe that?
Susan fell silent. Michael had hit the nail on the head.
You've always loved buying designer goods, but are you still doing that now?
Well, I just kept buying bags and shoes that suited each occasion, and it kind of got out of hand.
I've been sending you money out of my own allowance, and you were buying that many bags and wallets. I told you before to only buy what you need. I feel betrayed by your wasteful spending.
She then clung to Michael.
This is all a mistake, a lie.
What's a mistake? A lie? It's clear now that you're a liar. Don't contact me anymore, and of course, no more money from me.
Michael turned and walked away, never looking back at his mom. She collapsed on the spot. Rejected by her own son, she likely wouldn't recover from this.
If only you had hurried up and had children, it would have been better if you had them while I could see them.
Well, I didn't have children for your sake, Susan. Then I went home with Mary and Emma. I thought I'd never want to meet her again. And it seemed they hadn't seen her since I warned them to be careful when going to and from school. One day, relieved that all was quiet, I got a call from the hospital. Apparently, a few days after our encounter, Susan had tripped and fallen at a step in the neighborhood supermarket. When I went to the hospital to pick her up, I found Susan in bed, along with the supermarket manager and a police officer. She had taken a bad fall and apparently broken her leg. I learned that she had been secretly taking items from the ready meals section, and the store had been watching her.
No, this is...
I don't want to hear your excuses. It's embarrassing, so please don't contact me ever again.
What can I do? Before, Michael used to send me money, but that stopped.
I was at a loss for words.
And nobody would tell me your contact info. I felt lonely.
Well, that figures. Apparently, she was trying to get in touch with me one way or another. She must have been asking around, hoping someone would tell her our whereabouts. Susan has always believed that if she says something, people will listen. However, I had taken thorough precautions beforehand. I informed various people about Susan's behavior and the unpleasant experiences I had endured with her, while also asking them not to give out my contact information. The last thing I wanted was to meet such a self-centered person again. In the end, no one had given Susan our contact details. I heard that some had even blocked her calls, likely because she was quite disliked within the circle. Anyone would naturally distance themselves from such a person. Given her nature, it wasn't surprising to hear she was being blocked. Ultimately, she spent her days in the hospital alone. She's lashing out at hospital staff because of the stress, and she's been given severe warnings. It's manageable for now, but who knows what will happen next. This is her way of continuing to go crazy without realizing how much she is hated. I'm enjoying peaceful days with Mary, Emma, and Michael. I was worried about what would happen when we unexpectedly met Susan in the park, but I'm glad I took decisive action. It was good to discuss our problems with her with Michael. Together as a couple, we went through treatment, and through this process, we were able to meet Mary and Emma. I've also come to understand that if you don't value people like Susan, it eventually comes back to affect you as well.
Mom! Over here, hurry up! Mom, you're so slow.
Mary and Emma were beckoning with bursting smiles. I ran to catch up with them and gave them a big hug. I want to cherish the happiness of living these joyful days with Mary, Emma, and Michael.